Welcome back to the Noel Casler podcast, episode 23. I'm back here with always my main man, Jimmy Kennedy, having himself a good hair day today, ladies. Jimmy, how you doing, brother?
Hair is immaculate today, Noel. Thanks for noticing, buddy. Always good to talk with you. Another crazy week to be in the US of A, my man.
Yeah, it's a fine place to live, isn't it?
The decline of our society is really just setting in. I mean, this vaccine thing has become, let's make a deal. Jim Irsay is offering tickets to a preseason football game for people that aren't vaccinated.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
For something that'll save your life and save you from suffering, and for something that people in other nations would kill to have. And it's psychological warfare at this point. The right doesn't, all the people that are promoting not getting vaccinated and personal freedoms, your Governor DeSantis, your Governor Abbott, your Greg Ducey's or whatever the hell his name is in Arizona, these guys are all vaccinated, right? You can't walk into the governor's mansion in Florida and get anywhere near the governor or his staff without following COVID protocols. And that was from the beginning. That was a year and a half ago. They locked that place down. So they're protecting these guys. But they know it's a political cudgel to wield against their opposition. And they frankly want the deaths to rise because they can blame it on Biden. They can say, look, this guy didn't handle it. That's why DeSantis stopped counting the deaths last year and fired the woman who was making a website charting where COVID was in Florida. She became an outlaw. They raided her house in the middle of the night with long guns and stuff. So they don't care about people dying. They care about wielding power over these people. And they want an uneducated populace because it's easier to do that. And in Florida, they added an extra twist to it by offering, school vouchers. So if you're uncomfortable sending your child to a public school that's going to require them wearing a mask to save their lives, their fellow classmates' lives, potentially their grandparents, their bus driver, their cafeteria food worker, all these other people that they're going to come in contact with children. They're offering vouchers for the parents that think it's an affront to their personal freedoms to have their child masked so they can send them to private schools. And mostly those are probably going to be some kind of parochial Southern, Baptist kind of school where they're not going to learn any of that hanky stuff like science and dinosaurs, and learn the real truth that little baby Jesus was born to a virgin in a manger 2,000 years ago. And that's when the world began. You know what I mean? They hold on to fairy tales and ignorance, just like they did in the olden days. They burned witches at the stake because they were afraid of progress. They were afraid of the power that women had and women's independence. A lot of this world and the politics and religion of this world is based on white men's fear, and how do I keep other people down? How do I protect my mediocrity? And now you have stands of mediocrity. Texas is the capital of worldwide mediocrity right now. It's the dumbest place you could live in the country, and it's not to say everyone there is dumb. People, I'm a comedian. These are generalizations. I'm speaking out about currents that I see in our country. Alabama has the highest number of PhDs probably in the United States. People don't know that, but Huntsville, Alabama has got a lot of smart people in there. That's where they do all this rocket research and NASA and stuff. There's exceptions to every rule. Obviously, there's brilliant people in Texas, Michael Dell, your whole computer, high-tech corridor is there outside of Austin. So, but what I'm saying is that the populace, that the people that they exploit that are going to vote for little Dan Crenshaw because he puts on a superhero Captain America costume and a glass eye and fights the bad guys, but then hides under a desk, when real trouble hits, but pretends like he's a hero. These cosplay Republicans are able to manipulate the populace in these places because they've been dumbed down over generations by Fox News, by Reagan, by cutting arts funding, as we say on this show pretty much every week. And that's coming home to roost now. Those people are now defenseless against a guy like DeSantis, who's basically instituting death for you and your children as a matter of policy to help his political candidacy for president. He's running for president now. He stopped governing a long time ago. He's coming out there and trying to get sound bites against Biden every day as if he's in a debate 3 years away from the next presidential transfer of power. So, it's incredibly morose, and it's something we shouldn't stand for. You know, a lot of people are in these states and they're like, well, what can I do about it? I'm a good person. I live here. I vote Democratic. Well, it's your state. You know, you can surround the Capitol. You can go down to Tallahassee and say, we're not standing for this. Fuck you. Get out of here. You know, you're a criminal. You're a crook. And that's a state that's been hijacked by crooks for decades. Rick Scott was even worse than DeSantis in many ways. The guy pleaded the fifth like 85 times in his deposition because he stole the most money from Medicare of anybody in history when he was CEO of a healthcare company. He literally robbed Medicare blind. They busted him for it. He pled the fifth. And then he got this sweetheart deal that somehow only like rich white men get, where they had to pay him $6 million to quit. You know, after he used the company to embezzle money from our federal government, they paid him to leave. That only happens to white people. Black guy steals a backpack, allegedly, and gets thrown in solitary confinement for 3 years, or works on a chain gang in Mississippi for 20 years because he stole a pack of gum. But these white guys get paid to leave. Oh, thank you kindly, sir. Please leave now with your millions that you pilfered from the government, and then run another political campaign talking about how you're against socialism, when you just made your fortune by stealing something from a democratic socialist policy. So they know what they're doing, but they don't want their people knowing what they're doing. You follow me here, Jimmy?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I take a look at, Brett Kavanaugh. I said in another episode, I could get an interview at Budweiser. And if I said, I love beer in the interview, like enthusiastically, as Brett Kavanaugh did, even at Budweiser, I'm not getting that job. But Brett Kavanaugh is on the court right now, and you're having a really bad week if you're Governor DeSantis when Matt Gaetz is the second most hated guy in your state, and he's still serving on committee, knowing that he had a Venmo transaction for sex trafficking. Like, Florida has been a poor example of what America is for a long time, but the entire state, including its legislation or its legislative body, has become a Florida man. An embarrassment of a headline more often than not.
Exactly. Yeah. No, Florida should be arrested. Like the entire state should just be like, you have the right to remain silent. Get up against the wall. Okay. You guys get out of the swamp, stop wrestling that alligator, put down the Mountain Dew and the meth pipe, and listen to reason here. And the irony of Florida is it's full of smart people. And this is going to sound bad, but a lot of Northerners, a lot of New Yorkers went down to South Florida. That's where people retire. I know somebody there who's, went to Harvard, had a huge business. I mean, these guys are rich, and a lot of them, I rail against on here, Palm Beach and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people who hurt somebody in a way to get their money, and now they're just living the dream down there. But there's a lot of just normal people who grew up with compassion and education. There's people who worked in the civil rights movement, in the 60s. That was infused by lots of Jewish Americans, were involved in that stuff. And they're now retired down in Florida, and they're held hostage in these retirement communities because they're surrounded by idiots, and they have to go play bridge with them in the afternoon or play golf with them and stuff, and it's become like a political thing. Like, well, we don't discuss the virus or masks because we don't want to offend our neighbors. It shouldn't be offensive. It's a matter of public health policy. If you were at an orgy and somebody had herpes and was like, yo, I'm getting in next, you'd be like, no, you're not. You going outside, bro. Come back when you don't have a flare up. You ain't getting none of this, But like, for somehow now we're supposed to look the other way in Walmart when somebody comes and hacks a cough on you because they're buying an air mattress because grandma's moving in or something,
Yeah, I mean, and I've said this on other shows, but if we can't unite under a pandemic, the great equalizer, as a virus that could infect anybody, including children who are now on ventilators, if you want to see that sort of stuff, it's documented, it's everywhere. What can we unite under? The crazy thing about these Trump supporters still going along with this anti-masking, anti-vaccination narrative, it's killing his base. How many old people voted for Trump? That are 65 and up. And most of the people that would die from COVID are that age. It's truly a cult where they're going along with the leader, even if it hurts them.
Well, I get that point, Jimmy. And I hear a lot of people pointing that out. It's an astute observation, but here's the fallacy in that argument. They don't care about their base. They don't need the votes anymore because they're cheating. Right? They're not counting on getting the popular vote anymore. They're not counting on winning in a district fair and square in a democratic way. They're counting on gerrymandering. And beyond that, now they're counting on, purging the voter rolls. Raffensperger, the guy who we kind of saw as a hero in January because he didn't acquiesce to Trump's demands of just overturn it, and we learned this week that he tried to force the DOJ to do just that. Just say just say it wasn't fair and I'll take care of the rest. You know what I mean? Like Raffensperger yesterday sent out letters to 250,000 voters and said, hey, I'm purging you from the voter rolls. The letter was basically a precursor to you're getting kicked off the rolls. And the demographics of these, letters fall heavily in the African-American community. So they're basically making sure that what happened in Georgia, where Warnock, and I can't remember the other guy's name right now, where they won. Who's the other guy, Jimmy?
John Ossoff.
John Ossoff, right? So they're going to make sure that never happens again, right? So they're purging these voter rolls. So they don't need the base. They need a minimal amount of angry white men and women to vote for them, to vote for Marjorie Taylor Greene. And even if they lose that vote, they now have secretaries of state in these Republican red states that are going to overturn the results anyway. You think you're going to get a fair election out of Arizona anytime in the future? It's like the Reichstagers, like they're just going to be like, nope, the Nazi won. The white guy won. So they don't care about their base, and they're willing to sacrifice them to sort of hurt Biden politically.
Well, and as far as like overseeing the last governor election in Florida, it was Governor Kemp who eliminated how many votes from the rolls that ultimately gave him the win. It's not like they are beyond doing it. They've already done it.
Exactly.
To put Kemp in power. And once you open the door to one criminal act, it only allows for more egregious stuff in the future. We've seen that with the Trump administration.
Exactly. And, like you said before, if you can't get people to unite in healthcare, in coming together to combat a pandemic, which is the greatest challenge of our lifetime. In World War II, they faced real challenges. Not that this isn't a real challenge. It's certainly a real challenge, but you're able to do it with the conveniences of modern life and on the back of one of the world's top economies for the last 70 years, coming from an industrialized, very wealthy economy for the most part. Even the poorest among us aren't poor by the standards of the Great Depression, where you were boiling shoe leather to make soup. You know what I mean? And that's what these kids were coming out of. And then they all got together and were able to work in 24-hour shifts in factories. The women are the unsung heroes of World War II. We talk about the men, and yes, they were brave and stormed D-Day and all this stuff that obviously is insanely crazy and brave, but so were these women. I talk about this all the time. 20-year-old women left their homes in the Midwest and went and worked in shipyards in places like Portland and learned how to weld underwater, bro, in a dive bell, in one of those things from like 20,000 leagues under the sea, in a big leather suit. They're underwater in the dark welding. And a month ago, they were living in Minnesota and never seen the ocean. Right. That's life-threatening, scary stuff. And they're doing that in 12-hour shifts. Coming out of a place where they could barely get enough food growing up, and they saw their daddy lose work and they're living in a cold flat. And now we can't put on a mask to walk in Walmart to pick up your freaking giant size like Fritos and go home and watch Netflix and play your video games and sit on your couch and buy anything you want on a computer with a click of a button and have it delivered to your door the next day.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, I just don't understand it. Like you said, Amazon Prime is an option. It's not like we had any shortage of content that we could have watched. All the streaming platforms have done extremely well. That's one business model that hasn't failed during this pandemic. And, as somebody with an underlying condition, that's the other crazy thing. On a community level, somebody that could be impacted by this virus, and you should do it for them because you know them personally. There are plenty of people that would know me in my town, and I would hope they'd wear a mask for me. But it's become a constitutional crisis and a hit to their ego as opposed to just following a public health measure. It's really sad.
Right. And it's part of this toxic masculinity thing. Like this, I guess this guy's a baseball player, some kind of idiot. Don't even say his name. But the awesome Christopher Titus got into like a Twitter war with him because he's selling T-shirts that said like real men don't ask permission. Basically a pro-rape T-shirt, and he's just some douchebag baseball player that I've seen, on Twitter and stuff. But it's like if you're selling toxicity, and real men don't ask permission and it's freedom. I don't have to wear a mask. People don't understand what freedom is. You know what true freedom is, Jimmy? It's getting away from the conditioning that you're sold, because we're all programmed by our parents and our society, right? We're born sort of with a natural state of wonder and empathy and caring for the other world, and the world around us, nature, other children, other people. We're happy. We're kind of like how you are all the time, Jimmy, right?
Hopefully.
And then we get skeptical, right? We get like, hey, our parents say, hey, don't play with that kid. They're not like us. That family shouldn't even be living in this neighborhood. This guy shouldn't do this and that. Like, and I apologize for the noise, guys. I'm out here on Nantucket. It's just loud. I guess it's lawnmower day in the house I'm in, but bear with us. And so now you get like conditioned in your society, and you're told what freedom is, and it's behave in a certain way, and nobody can tell you what to do. True freedom is realizing that you're connected to everything, that you have a responsibility to the birds, the bees, the bugs, the people. We're all one organism when you break things down to a sort of spiritual, metaphysical level. We're all part of the same whole. It's always the right hand fighting the left. As much as you think it's not, if you want to punish those people that are coming here to live a better life, you're ultimately hurting yourself and weakening the host, weakening the whole planet. But this idea of this rugged individualism, it's freedom. You can't tell me to wear a mask. That's not freedom. True freedom is manning up and saying, I'm not going to get somebody else's grandmother sick because I don't have the right to do that, because we're both alive here at the same time. And it's incumbent upon all of us to do the best we can to ensure that everybody sort of lives in abundance and good health, right? That's real freedom. Real freedom is realizing you're part of a whole and a society, and you have to do everything in your power to, make it a safe place. It's not like, screw you, I don't care if you get sick, I'm not wearing a mask.
Well, and it's also an ability to understand that part of having power is an ability to allow others to have power. You're not trying to suppress their ability to advance their own lives. As long as it's something that is healthy for the majority of society, it becomes an issue. And we've seen it with nationalism becoming more popular now. People have tied their national identity into their religion, into their political belief, and people kill for stuff like that. That's where it's really dangerous, and it's hard to unring those bells once you've lost that much humanity. It's hard to go back.
Absolutely. And it's also like, think about, you mentioned Florida before, and we have all these things with DeSantis and the masks and, giving vouchers for private schools because he made it illegal to have mask mandates in these districts and all these horrible things. We're not even addressing the environmental impact. Florida has the Florida Stream. It's part of the Gulf Stream. An article came out this week how it could collapse. The Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, or whatever it's called, AMOC. It's basically the Gulf Stream. And that's where warm, salty water comes up, because the water's saltier down by the Caribbean, right? Because it's hot, so it evaporates, has more salt content. It comes up on this stream that hugs the east coast of North America and goes all the way to Greenland, right? And when it hits the higher latitudes, it gets colder and it sinks below the water's surface, right? So it's this big stream that goes up there carrying salt. And then it pushes down the water beneath it, and that water recirculates down to Antarctica. Okay. And that controls the world's climate, essentially. And now that everything's heating and that the glaciers are melting, there's more fresh water going into the North Atlantic, and that Gulf Stream is rising. And if that Gulf Stream can no longer sink down into the water, we're dead. It freezes. That's how the last ice age happened. Okay. Yeah. It freezes. And because that's what controls the world's weather, essentially, because it transfers the heat. It's basically like a heat regulator. You know what I mean? It brings some warmth up, and it brings some coolness down, and it keeps it all chill. Once that collapses, it's game over. Sea levels rise, North Europe freezes because it's a main temperature stabilizer in Europe. So that's like apocalyptic stuff, right? And that goes right by Florida. There's actually part of it is called the Florida Stream, right? We see this summer, this red tide. There was 600 million pounds of fish that washed up on the Florida shores. You can't go to the beach in Florida. It's summer, but you can't go there unless you want to smell, what millions of dead fish rotting on the beach smell like. He's not doing anything about that. He's not doing anything about red tide and algae blooms. I'm on Nantucket this week. This pond I've been swimming in forever, you can't go in the pond anymore because there's an algae bloom and it's toxic. This is Nantucket. This is the North Atlantic. This is cold, normally pretty cold, chill water. The world is changing before our eyes. And if you can't get people to wear a mask, you think you're going to get them to stop riding their lawnmower for 4 hours every Saturday, or driving the Ford F-150 King Ranch edition to their bank where they sit at a desk for 6 hours, but want to feel like a tough guy when they get out in the parking lot because they're into like being a toxic male instead of showing up in a Prius like they should. And like they do in Europe, driving a little car that gets fuel economy. You think you're going to be able to unite Americans behind that? And there's a reason they're attacking that, Jimmy. There's a reason that every Republican comes out against the Green New Deal and tries to promote like AOC as a communist and all this stuff. And they try to make fun of it in simple terms, right? What was Trump saying? Hey, they're taking away your hamburgers. They're going to make cows illegal. Windmills cause cancer. No, they don't. Windmills are a real good way to get energy. It's wind. It's free. Digging in the ground for an oil company. ExxonMobil just got kicked out of this climate policy board that they were on yesterday. These oil companies will destroy the planet, and the oil companies own the politicians. Greg Abbott is owned outright by fracking interests in oil and gas interests. And they just announced yesterday in Texas that the consumers are going to have to pay for that shutdown they had last winter when Ted Cruz flew to Cancun.
What?
Right? Yeah,
That's
their bills
crazy.
are going to go up 10 to 15% for the next 10 years. So they have to pay the cost of that. And during that, by the way, those companies made $1 billion in that week because they raised the rates because they're not part of a regulatory board. So they were able to say, hey, your power just went from $200 a month to $1,200. Sorry.
Wasn't it the state of Texas that decided to make that electrical grid shoddy, and then they're going to make the citizens pay for that mistake?
Right. Well, they didn't want to be part of the national grid because they didn't want regulation, right? If the how power works in this country is it's part of a national grid. So if the power goes out in California, they can pipe in some from Nevada to make up the difference, but then it all has to be sort of like under the auspices of a big regulatory board that can say what you're doing with the factories and, not factories, but, with your power plants and all that, make it clean and stuff like that. And Texas was like, oh, hell no, we don't want no part of that. We're Texas. We're going to do it our own way. So they have a crappy board where they cut costs because they want the guys who own it to make all the money. It's the same way that, the Koch brothers will run pipelines all over the country and not care if they leak because it's cheaper to have a leak than it is to fix a potential leak because then they have to shut down operations to make the repairs, right? So these oil companies are based on like, we get to pollute with impunity. Why would we care to regulate the thing and make sure it's safe? We're only going to make money. And you saw the worst case scenario this February or whenever it was in that ice storm. And what happened? Like the oil company, the electric companies didn't suffer. They made billions in that couple of week period. And then they passed on the cost of that to the consumer, and the governor signed off on it because they own him. He doesn't have a choice but to do that. They have his little balls in a jar in their desk somewhere. And Big Tommy, whoever the fuck, has his steak and his cigar and says, here's what you're going to do, Abbott. And Abbott doesn't think twice about it anymore because he knows there's enough idiots running around in their pickup trucks with flags and guns that if he throws them a little gun bonus like September 1st, you don't need a permit anymore. You can shoot anybody you want, like that. They're going to be like, oh, that's the guy for us, Robo Rambo or whatever the hell, So like that's what I'm saying. That's what my theme here is, that we somehow need to sort of educate people against the Southern strategy that was enacted by Reagan, that you're not this mythical American rugged individual thing, that's a cartoon character that only hurts the planet, the society, your children, and each generation it gets successively worse. It doesn't get better. As bad as those states were in the 80s when Reagan let like corporations all move out and shut down the factories, they're 10 times worse now. The Rust Belt rusted and then meth came in because the Sackler family wanted to sell OxyContin, even though everybody said in the 90s, you can't be giving this out for pain management. You're going to create an army of addicts. And that's what happened. Go through Ohio now, go through West Virginia. These people are devastated. You'd be hard pressed to find somebody who hasn't lost a friend or a child or a parent to an overdose. It's like the leading cause of death in America right now. That was all for one family, the Sackler family, who owned Purdue Pharma and wanted to sell this shit. When I saw all that go down in New York City, So, and they put their name on, the side of the Guggenheim, the Sackler wing or something. And you feel like, hey, these are good people. They live on Park Avenue. That's the thing or they're here in Nantucket, right? I walk around Nantucket. There's these super yachts everywhere. And I always say, like, you don't get one of those without hurting somebody. Not everybody gets to be Michael Jordan or Elvis. Like, certain people are going to make a huge amount of money, right? You invent Microsoft, you become a Bill Gates, right? But now there's a gazillion billionaire. That shows you something is wrong. And you shouldn't have that much outsized wealth compared to other people in your society, especially if you're not paying your fair share in taxes.
Well, and it wasn't like Jeff Bezos wasn't making money that he launched himself into space. That was a free commercial that he got on national TV. CNN, MSNBC, every major news network was streaming the launch of that when they knew damn well he didn't pay into the tax system. Trump's the same way, paid $750 to the United States government, serving as its president of the United States. That just doesn't seem right.
Right. And said, that makes me smart, because Hillary knew it and she called him on it and said, well, that makes me smart. And people buy that. They think, oh, that's awesome. I don't want to pay taxes either. It's so funny. Like, I know a lot of these kind of guys that favor Trump and sort of favor his mindset. And it's all been about taxes. And first of all, Trump raised taxes on me. He punished the people in New York, like in Westchester and Long Island, who didn't vote for him. And he raised the property taxes essentially he lowered the home mortgage, like the tax credit. You used to be able to write off $15,000 of your home, and now you can only write off 10 grand or something. So everybody's property taxes went up. Where I live went up in California, Southern California, places that didn't vote for him. He punished right away. But my point is, those kind of people, it always comes down to these nickel and dime tax bills. And you should just assume you're going to give a lot of your money away to the government. That's how it works. It's not the evil empire. You're, existing in this society because of the government. They don't bitch about it in Scandinavia as much. And you know what? People aren't sleeping on the streets. People aren't going out without health care. People aren't going bankrupt because they get a diagnosis of cancer or something, because they've been eating poisonous food that's been sold to them by a corporation that has never paid taxes. And they're working with a $7.50 an hour minimum wage. So what else are they going to do? You got a half an hour for lunch. There's a $5 lunch. It gives you sugar and fried potatoes and some horrible meat, that's been factory farmed and destroying the planet. And it seems like a bargain, but it's not. You're paying with your life. And if we pay more into our society, we get more out of it. But my point is, they're able to buy these guys off with these small little tax breaks. Bush gave people back $2,000. GW Bush, right? $2,000 was his big selling point over, Al Gore, who wanted to save the planet, who's one of the early people saying, look, we got to address this now. Can you imagine if we had started to implement what Gore was talking about 20 years ago? It's 20 years later. I'm sitting in Nantucket. It rained for a week, right? It was 60 degrees and rainy. I've been coming here forever. 1 or 2 rainy days in the summer, when I'm here for a week or two. Now it's raining and cold pretty much every day. A nice sunny day is the rarity. So it's on us. We're talking about the Gulf Stream collapsing. One of the scientists, and this is a wonderful article, like if you don't read anything else this summer, read this article in the Washington Post about the AMOC Gulf Stream collapsing. And the article cites the guy who's the head of the Oceanographic Institute in Woods Hole, Mass. And I was there like 5 years ago with Graham Nash. He was giving an award because he's done a lot of environmental conservation. So he was given this thing called the Stellwagen Award. And we went up there and they gave us this big luncheon, or him a luncheon. I'm his road manager, so I'm there with him. And we got this big luncheon and we're sitting around with all these research scientists and, guys who saved the whales and climate scientists. And this guy, Peter DeMock or something, who's the head of it. He's named in this article. We went to his house for dinner later. But we're sitting at this luncheon and this little girl comes up to the table and she's got a pen and paper, and the waitress brings her over and she's like, hey, sorry to disturb you guys. She wants to ask an autograph. She wants to ask for an autograph. And there's this little girl holding a pen and paper. And we're like, okay, and I'm assuming she's going to ask Graham for an autograph, right? He's the famous rock star. I'm kind of surprised like a 10-year-old knew who he was.
Yeah.
But so I'm like, all right, she's going to, her parents sent her over or something. They recognize Graham. And she points to one of the climate scientists and said, you're my hero. I started a lemonade stand this summer and donated money to your charity to try and help save the environment. And I was like, oh my God, you know, what a wonderful thing that these children were getting involved in this. And it wasn't the rock star who was her idol. It was the climate scientist, you know, and it gave me this idea. I was like, I had a light bulb moment. And then I later pitched it after she went away because we were kicking around ideas of what we could do. And I said, let's do a show, a TV show that's like Jacques Cousteau meets Behind the Music, where we'll take a rock star like Neil Young or somebody out doing whale tagging, you know, looking at the barrier reef. And we had guys from from NOAA there. Dan Basta was the head of the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association at the time. This was during Obama's years. And he was like, great, like you can have anything you want. You can have a submarine, you know? And I was like, great, let's put Springsteen in a submarine, you know, and get people to tune in to see, you know, Eddie Vedder or their favorite rock star, but realize that the real rock stars were these climate scientists. You know what I mean? That were these guys that were trying to save the planet. And let's try to turn on a younger generation to get involved in this fight, because there really is nothing more important. Even this health scare is horrible and horrific. It's nothing compared to what's going to happen when it really starts hitting the fan in terms of climate change. You don't think you like immigration now. Wait till there's, you know, 50 million people who can't live in Central America anymore trying to get up north to higher ground, because that's what's going to happen. Wait till Miami's uninhabitable. So I had this idea, and it didn't happen for one reason or another. It went kind of far, and the Rockefeller Foundation was going to fund it at one point, and then things happen. But it's somebody should make that show. Maybe we'll make it, Jimmy. Maybe we'll put you put you on a boat. You want to go out to sea? I know Jimmy doesn't like sharks, y'all.
Well, you know, it's Jimmy says crazy things when animals attack. You know, that might be the name of the show. But no, I'd love to do it, man. And you know, music has always been something that unites people. So to bring in folks that have a music background or some kind of celebrity, you know, I could see LeBron James going on an adventure in the wild, trying to see what he can find and discover as the leader of the NBA and a guy that's looked at as a prominent leader. You know, we need guys like that to be supporting these things.
That's a great idea. See, I hadn't even thought of athletes. That would be even better. You'd get even more people involved. You know, maybe I'll ask Jay-Z tonight at Obama's party. You know, it's on the other island. I'm on Nantucket. Martha's Vineyard is the other one. So Obama scaled back his party. You know, there was like 600 people invited. A lot of them got the axe, but I think Beyonce and Jay-Z still made the cut, and I didn't make the cut. I'm just joking.
You'd hope so.
Yeah, but I had my time with Obama. But for me, I got involved in progressive politics because of musicians. You know, it was the No Nukes concert that were a galvanizing event for me as a kid. And I ended up working with those guys, Jackson Browne and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Graham Nash. That's where I learned a lot of what I know, you know, and not that I know a lot. I don't. You know, I'm just a comedian. I'm just somebody who cares about the world, and people will comment like, oh, this is brilliant. This makes so much sense. I'm not like there's experts on all of this stuff, and I'm not one of them, and I don't claim to be. What I emulate is empathy. Okay. What I've learned is empathy. And I see artists that I admire caring about something other than themselves and their new car or their new single or their new guitar. You want to see people that are going to point you to like, this is what you should be paying attention to. And if we bring people together, we can do it together. You know, that's the thing. That's what we're losing in this time that our country's divided. We're losing the joy of empathy, the joy of working together as a team. You're a sports fan. You see the Super Bowl. You know, I used to run on the field every year when a team won. Okay. And I don't know dick about football, you know, and I happened to be there for like 13 Super Bowls, but I would run onto that field no matter who won, except for the Patriots. When the Patriots won, they're poor sports and they're assholes. And Belichick's house is just down the road, by the way, Jimmy. I walk by it every day and I think of you. But and it's a nice place, as you can imagine. But what happens on that field when they win is empathy. It's teamwork. They got through this together, and that's where the jubilation comes in, right? There's never really any stars. You know, they hand the trophy to the quarterback and he lifts it up, but it's the linemen. It's the guys you never heard of who were on the field because they were part of a team. They all made sacrifices for the greater good. And that's what feels good. That's what we're celebrating when we watch sports. We're celebrating, for the most part, teamwork. Even the individual athletes that we're seeing in the Olympics that are on now are part of a team. Simone Biles, stepped aside for the betterment of her team. They tried to knock her for doing it. No, that's real strength. I'm not ready today, coach. Put somebody else in. I'm not 100%. Give this other person a shot instead of ball hogging it and being like, this is my moment on the world stage. Think of the amount of empathy it takes to not grab the spotlight, to know you're going to get pilloried for doing it, but to know that it's the right thing to do for you. And turns out she lost her aunt during that time. So she gave greater deference to the world around her, to the lineage of her family, to the sort of temple of her heart over the temple of sport and a gold medal. She doesn't need a gold medal. That's a champion if ever there was one born. You know what I'm saying? That 100%. Is a champion. That is greatness walking among us. And that's what true greatness is. It's stepping aside and letting somebody else have a shot, right? What are the videos people love to see most on Twitter, right? It's always when somebody who had to sit on the sidelines for the whole season and they're ahead and they're like, we're going to give this guy the ball, right? And you see his team letting this guy run up the field and you see him smiling. And then you see the other team throwing fake tackles, jumping just behind him, right? That's when I start to cry. Every time I watch that, when the other team says, I'm getting in on this, this feels better than humiliating my opponent. This feels good. And then everybody's crying, right? Because that's love, baby. That's what we're here for, to love each other, lift each other up. And that's what we need now more than ever. And anybody who's coming at you to divide this place, to say you don't have to wear a mask, is not a leader. They're a criminal. They're a criminal trying to hurt you to better themselves. And they're forgetting empathy and compassion. They're trying to destroy you. They're the same thing as a bank robber, willing to shoot somebody to take a bunch of cash out of a vault. It's the same thing. DeSantis is killing people. Governor Abbott is killing people.
Well, and I know I've been very sports centric today, but I've got a really cool story. So when I think this was right before Peyton Manning left for the Broncos, he was still playing for the Colts. And my doctor got me an opportunity to play football at Lucas Oil Stadium. Like, they were going to have the stadium open with the lights on. And it was part of our Challenger Football League. It was part of we called it our Super Bowl because we had played a few games and I was the starting quarterback. I was the captain of the team. And then right as we're about to start playing on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium, 3 Colts players came out and was like, this is the reason why we play football, to see guys like you be out on the field. And it meant a lot to have a grown adult tell me that I was strong, so it doesn't take a lot to change somebody's life, but empathy can do it.
There you go, Jimmy. And you are strong, brother. I've met a lot of football players, brother. You're stronger than any football player I've ever met. Okay. And I met a lot of them. I met your heroes,
Peyton Manning got into the Hall of Fame this week. So it's been to see my sports hero get there. It means a lot.
I'm going to tell you a Manning story then. There's your bonus, and then we're going to close out the show because Mr. Whacker is outside the window here. I'll be back at the fireplace next week, folks. And thanks for listening for the through the disturbances. And it's what I'm talking about. It's climate change. You don't need to be weed whacking with a gas-powered weed whacker right now. It's let it go. Let your garden go. Let the butterflies fly. Let the bees come. This is not the time for manicured lawns, okay? That's a throwback to another era. The shit doesn't even grow here naturally. Okay, get over it. It's not Versailles. It's your cul-de-sac, in Parsippany. Let it go. Let the leaves fall and nourish the earth. Anyway, so the Super Bowl where Peyton Manning won in 2007, whenever it was out in Phoenix, that wonderful game, where they destroyed the Patriots, with the catch against the helmet and all that. So, one of the highlights of my life was just being there and running onto the field. And Belichick actually walked off the field early in disgust. So we all ran on the field to celebrate. And the coaches, the referees started yelling at us like, there's still time on the clock. They were trying to keep the celebration down and it couldn't. And I'm running out there and confetti's falling. And I look down, I find a $20 bill. Spike Lee's sitting next to me. I'm like, look, I just found a 20, like what else is going to happen? A cheerleader going to kiss me? Like, this is insane, So I'm walking around taking all these pictures. And then after a little bit, I go into the hallways, the back hallways by the players' locker rooms. And I'm with a buddy and we're taking pictures. And all of a sudden I see Archie, Peyton, and their mom coming this way. You know what a vom is? It's like the hallway of a stadium. It's
Sure.
like the part that leads onto the field. So they're coming from the right outside of the VOM. And then I see Eli. And it's the first time they talk, see each other. And Eli's walking, like carrying his helmet, still in his uniform. And he goes, Archie sees Eli. They see each other. And Archie goes, son. And Eli goes, dad. And they just embrace, right? And they're just this family at this point, this wonderful thing that just happened on the world stage that was amazing was now reduced into this moment of a family hugging and loving each other. And Peyton was laughing and smiling and happy for his little brother that he got his moment. He wasn't like, oh, I'm so jealous, because it was clearly one of the best games you're ever going to see in your life. It was a family hugging and loving each other, right? It was a beautiful moment. And then I told my friend, get my picture. And I stuck myself in sideways and gave a peace sign as they're having this moment. And one of their security guards came and was just like, get the hell out of here, and threw me out of there. But, and I have that picture somewhere, but it was just a beautiful moment. And it's like what you're saying. All of this stuff is about love. Ultimately, any kind of like display of human greatness or anything is all to kind of celebrate each other. Yeah, we're competitive. Yeah, it's a sport. Yeah, the game is about knocking each other's heads off. But ultimately, if you're victorious, it's because you've done something that other people in that unit can feel good about. Do you know what I'm saying? He was doing that because he was making his pops proud, who was an incredible quarterback, and his little brother so it wasn't about proving something. It was about sharing something. You follow me? And that's what you should orient your life towards. What can I share? What can I give somebody else? How can I make somebody else's life better? How can I be of service with these talents that I have? And that's when you really feel good, because it's not about getting glory for yourself. It's about giving glory to something else. All right. So that's where we're going to stop it this week. Jimmy, you got anything you want to promote? And be careful, everybody out there. It's a hot summer, right?
I'll just plug the website for anybody that wants to check out my stuff. You can go to jbkonair.com. One-stop shopping for Twitter and Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore. No, I decided to toss myself of Facebook, so I'm not on there anymore. But still, Twitter and Instagram, JBK on air.
Big news. Jimmy's got his own website. Damn, I always forget to plug my website. Well, I got a website too, noelcasler.com. You can find everything on there as well. I am still on Facebook. I despise Facebook. I would encourage all of you guys to get off Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg is evil incarnate, and it's a scam, and it's a horrible thing that's helped spread this disinformation, probably more than anything else. Your people not wearing your masks are probably doing that because they first heard about it on Facebook. So congrats for getting off it. I can't at this point, just for whatever random person finds me, and I have a lot of my music contacts because that's how you keep in touch with some of these rock stars. They still have their pages on there. Not like you can just look it up, but you know what I mean. The guys I spend time with,
your contacts.
And my bus drivers and people like that. So I'm still on there. I hate it, but Twitter, you can find me on Twitter. You can find me on my website. You can find me at the Rams Head, September 16th, Annapolis, Maryland. We're all going to be safe. We're going to be vaxxed. We're going to be wearing a mask. I'm not going to big events before that, folks. I'm keeping my audience safe. It's going to be a safe, nice evening, and I'll be at the Wall Street Theater later in the fall, and more dates to come. So be safe out there. Episode 23 is in the books, and we'll see you next week. Take care of each other. Bye-bye.